Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Winning Drive podcast. I'm Reeta Hubbard, the NFL chick, co-host of the Glenn and Reeta Show on 105.7 The Fan, with my guy Cordell Woodland from Shaking It Up Sports and the Ravens reporter for 105.7 The Fan. Ravens got a lot of breaks on Monday night, as currently they are the sole number one seed in the AFC. Cordell, we'll talk about the AFC playoff picture later on in the podcast, but for now, let's talk some Ravens, specifically regarding the team itself and Coach Harbaugh, who we know he's been here since 2008. So my math says this is his 16th season because, you got to add one from the actual number of years, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this is his 16th season for the Ravens. Obviously, he's going to end up averaging 10 wins per year in his legacy as a Raven, which is really awesome from a head coaching perspective when you think about it. There's been some concerns, though, this season. And a lot of it has to do with some inconsistencies regarding Coach Harbaugh. And I'm curious to know your thoughts on maybe why there's been some inconsistencies. And I'll break it down. Like there's been some coaching blunders. Okay, for instance, in the Colts game, you bring out Zay Flowers at the end of the game to receive a punt. And for whatever reason, that was not communicated in order for what Zay was supposed to do. Zay makes the wrong decision. Essentially, it affects the fact that the Ravens win that game, and we know that they lose that game in overtime. Chargers game does not flag for two clear first downs that the refs did not see. And we'll talk about the refs later because they've been horrendous this year. 2 first down calls were not challenged, but then you challenged an obvious pass play that was legal. Weird. In Sunday's game against the Los Angeles Rams, you challenge a touchdown when you know that you can't challenge a touchdown because all touchdowns are reviewed. So there's been a lot of weird moments that's come from Coach Harbaugh this season. Some people would like to believe that the pressure is on because this is probably one of the better Ravens teams that he's had in quite some time. And that with everything going on in the AFC North and how things have broken down, it feels like this is the Ravens' year. So there's some added pressure to what Coach Harbaugh is already doing. I'm just curious to know your thoughts on his coaching this year and what you might think is the problem or what is causing the inconsistencies and sometimes irrational choices that's being made.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that without question, I think Harbs has had moments this year that he'd like to have back. He's had decisions or no decisions in situations that if he could, he'd like to go back in time and kind of change those. I guess maybe this is one of those times where me not being a Ravens fan allows me to kind of separate myself from the fans that are people that are a fan of the team that obviously have more emotions invested in the game than I do. So I'll be the rational voice, I guess.
Are you calling me irrational? Is that what just happened?
No, but being a fan is a part of the description. We're all irrational about our teams. That's just what comes with it. We look at it with a different eye. You know what I'm saying? So what we considering I don't have any emotions involved, I'll just say this. I think it's like I said, I'm not making any excuses for Harbs in the situations that you named. The ones you named are just a couple of the situations that we can go to point to with him. I will give him a pass on the Demarcus Robinson touchdown one because after going back and looking at it and talking to a couple of people, they didn't have their right personnel on the field. So I know everybody was all up in arms about Harbs' response to my question to him about that play.
Can you elaborate?
Which was him wanting to pretty much he wanted to extend the time because he felt like the Rams were going fast on the 2-point conversion and he wanted to slow it down.
Okay,
And
so
so
I guess the question is, why just not call the timeout? What was the flag, the
the
challenge flag
timeout would
about?
because that is the logical response, right? Just call a timeout. You had to end up using a timeout anyway. For them, the timeout would have been quicker. The timeout would have only given them the 30 seconds as opposed to him challenging it and then the officials being just oblivious to the rules themselves, because if they knew the rules, they would have nixed it right away and told him you can't do that. But instead, they let him throw the challenge flag. They go, they talk amongst each other, and they go back, they talk to Harbs, they go back, they talk to each other. Then they announce that he can't challenge it. So now he has to use a timeout. So on top of the time that's already wasted, now he gets his timeout as well.
So you view this as strategically smart, I'm assuming is what you're saying here.
It matches what he said. It does
Okay.
match what he said.
Okay.
I'll say that. And I'll admit, in the moment when he's answering that question, I'm like, this is total BS. I mean, he's pulling it out of his butt. I'm literally giving him that look as he's saying it to me. But I have to admit, I mean, after talking to somebody with the team that did let it be known that they didn't have their right, they didn't even have 11 people on the field, to my knowledge. So they were kind of about to get caught with their pants down in a sense. So, yeah, I mean, I guess we could take him for his word in that instance that he did that to extend the time. That doesn't take away all the other things that you mentioned and things that you didn't mention. I'll just say that I think we all get caught up in this idea that because coaches don't play the game physically, that they should be as close to perfect as possible, right? Because they're not in the game actually throwing the ball, catching the ball, making the tackles, actually doing that stuff. So the little bit that they can control, they should be as close to perfect as possible. And I'm not here to say that anybody's wrong in that aspect, because in all actuality, that is kind of the job description. But that being said, I don't think Harbs is any different than anybody else. I just think that since we're here and we watch this team so closely, and you guys are so invested, even myself for my job, I'm invested. We watch these guys with a different eye. We're so much more intense with the way that we watch it, the way we break it down. I just think that I mean, we just watched the Dolphins blow that game against the Titans. And I mean, how great of a job has Mike McDaniel's done this year? He didn't do everything right. We saw how different it looks when Tyreek Hill isn't out there. And now McDaniel is like, what do I call? What do I do? So I just think you could go to the best coaches in the league all the way down to the worst. They'll all make mistakes at times. Now, I guess the question is, are we concerned that the Harbs issues will come back to bite them in the postseason?
Correct.
And it could. The reality is it could. It's that's the answer, I believe, for every team that makes the postseason. Any of those coaches can make a decision that impacts the final outcome of the game. I'll say that if I'm going to bet on it, I would say that I'm going to bet that Harbs doesn't end up costing his team an opportunity to win the Lombardi Trophy this year. He's got his issues without question. He's going to have some head scratching moments, even probably again throughout the course of the season, and maybe even in the postseason. But I look at his team and the way that they play, and overall the way Harbs coaches. I just don't think that there's an upgrade. I would take Harbs as my coach in a heartbeat. And that's not to say that he's without fault or he's perfect. He definitely has his issues, but I don't think his issues are going to be bad enough to where it'll knock the Ravens off course when it's all said and done. If the Ravens don't win it all, I think it'll be because of what's done on the field or what's not done on the field, not necessarily due to Harbs' decision on a play or two here or there.
Do you think that it could be tightened up, though? Do you feel
like
that there's
definitely could get better? I mean, definitely could get better.
I think that's something we can say about all coaches.
Yeah,
I'm very well aware. I'm just making the point that it feels like, and I could be wrong, but it does feel like that there's been more head scratching decisions or non-decisions this season than maybe any other season. And you wonder if it's just the pressure is mounting a little bit because it feels like this is the Ravens' year. It feels like it could
Right.
be the
And I
Ravens'
think
year.
that's what it is. I think it's more so that people feel like the Ravens are, it's pretty much the Ravens to lose in the
Yeah.
conference. I don't know if we could say that about the Lombardi Trophy, but at least when you look at the AFC right now, the conference is really there for the taking.
Yep.
I'll say this. I would make the argument that Harbs has had more questionable decisions in years past. You think back to, what was it, last year, where they just would not stop going for it on fourth downs all the time.
Well, that, yes, he has become more conservative.
Right.
But what's funny about that is, Cordell, a lot of people weren't happy about the fact that 4th and short in the game on Sunday, he didn't even think twice. Punt team came straight out and was like, I ain't doing it.
Right.
And look, I
Right.
know that the defense had played better in the second half, so maybe you feel confident, but it's kind of like we're used to seeing Harbs making those types of decisions, and for whatever reason, he didn't.
Well, I think personnel decides that. You know your team, right? So in this instance, the Ravens have had one of the better defenses in the league this year. Harbs is going to trust that side of the ball. Not that it hasn't been that case in the past, but their defense this year is better than their defense has been in quite some time. And that's with knowing the Ravens always have one of the better defenses in the league. So I think it's just a combination of everything. You think back to Lamar's MVP year where they were going for it a lot and converting. That's because he knew that they had the best rushing offense in history, and you weren't going to stop them from getting any type of 4th and short situation. So now, like you said, he's gotten more conservative in those spots, and I don't know if it's necessarily because he doesn't trust his offense as much. I think it's more so about him trusting his defense to not give things up. So that impacts his coaching decisions and that. So I basically only made the point about the 4th down aggressiveness in the past to say, if it ain't that, it's something else, right? It wasn't always the challenges. The challenges haven't always been the issue, but now since the 4th quarter, things are gone. The challenges are, it's balance. You know, you plug one hole, another one opens. That's kind of how it works.
Completely agree. So, listen, they're 10-3, so it's kind of hard. It feels like we're probably splitting hairs here, and it's possible, but just a couple of things that we've noticed the past couple of weeks. And, I feel like that this is the time to have those discussions. Hopefully, I do love the explanation that you gave regarding the challenge / instead of the timeout. And I do think that that's a very smart perspective. I do wonder if that's how he thought that was going to go.
I mean, it's still a big
that just
chance
worked out in his favor.
Yes.
But you know what? He's the head coach of a team for 16 seasons.
Right.
I'll go with the former, and assuming he's way smarter than you or me, Cordell.
I'm like 95%. I'll give him, at this point, with the information I've gathered, I'll give him the 95% odds that he is telling the truth, and still that small 5% chance that it's complete BS.
Absolutely. I'll roll with you in that regard. All right, Cordell. So a problem that we've seen essentially all year, and maybe for the last couple of years, quite frankly, is the referees and the inconsistency. Speaking of inconsistencies, the referees who have absolutely been inconsistent all year long. Essentially, in every game, we have seen so many bad calls, non-calls, whatever. The Rams game is something that was another blip, it feels like. And so people will sit here and say that, oh, that was a block in the back. And I've watched that play in slow motion. I am not really sure that that is a block in the back. I think it is very close to being a block in the back, but I can see how that was not considered a block in the back. So I think that that's a good no call. And this is me not being biased here. This is me seeing it in slow motion as opposed to seeing it live. And it does look a little bit different. But I tell people that have talked about this, I don't care whether you think it's a block in the back or not. There were a lot of bad calls going the Ravens' way in that game. I think we can all agree that the Puka Nacua pass interference was ridiculous, not even because it was 5 yards out of bounds, but because Nacua actually wraps his arm around Marlon and somehow isn't getting a OPI, but Marlon gets the pass interference. There's also a no call that was a clear hold on Jadeveon Clowney on that touchdown run in the game. There were other things. The offsides call, it was not like a Kadarius Toney offsides where it was like clear offsides. It is actually ticky-tacky to me. It felt ticky-tacky. When I looked at it again, I was like, The point I'm making is that people will try to say that the pendulum is swinging with the referees, and maybe that is true or not, which, if that's the case, that's a problem for the National Football League all around. We've seen, and then the problem with this is that as bad as the no calls or the bad calls are, when they actually do get it right, Chiefs game, we want to argue about the refs doing the right thing in terms of calling things that they should be calling. So it just continues to grow the issues that fans have with when it comes to the referees. And I think that the league even said something recently regarding referees and how they have to reevaluate the situation, which hopefully that they do, because it's really a problem here.
I can't think of the last season that refs weren't a problem. I mean,
very true.
What was, we could go all the way back. What was the fail Mary? You know, the fail
was
Mary.
Was that the Packers game and the Lions?
The Packers. I think it was Packers in Seattle, maybe, or maybe it been Packers in Detroit. I can't remember.
I think it's Packers in Detroit.
It might be.
I know exactly what you're talking about. That was definitely one of. Oh, like, no, you're right. It is the Seattle game. You're right.
Yeah, I thought it was Seattle on the Monday night game. Yep. But I mean, and that was years ago. Mm-hmm. And it's just every year. And the reality is the refs are the most hated people on the field, whether they make the correct call, like you just said in the Chiefs game, or they make incorrect call, like the one you mentioned on the Puka Nacua pass. Damned if you do, damned if you don't, if you're the referees. So we got to take that into account. Nobody likes them. Nobody likes the refs.
But whose fault is that? Whose fault is that?
I think that's just the way it is. We watch the game to watch the players. Right. So the refs, no matter what sport, who likes referees? I mean, who likes them? They just interject themselves in a spot nobody wants them in. They're there to enforce rules. Who likes rules? You know what I'm saying? So it's like
rules are necessary, right?
Like they're necessary.
I want you to have a stop sign because I don't want everybody just to be rolling in the intersection.
Right.
So there's a place for rules.
It's necessary. You're right. And the stop sign is there for a reason, but let's not act like you ain't cussed out a red light when you in a rush. Like you know what I'm saying? Like
this is true. It's a red light. I ain't a red light runner now. I don't want to put that out there. But yeah, have we broken rules before? Sure.
Right. And we deem it. We like to deem what's a bendable rule. Right. Like it's a no biggie. He's barely offsides. He's barely touching him. He's holding him, but he's not affecting the play. We want to decide when the refs should insert themselves in the game. And so this is where I am with the referees. It's impossible to be a referee. I have a very, very, very small experience being a referee in a flag football league and in a rec basketball league. Oh, I hated it. I will never do it again. It's so stressful. And everybody's complaining. Everybody's coming to you about what you missed. And then the calls you do make, everybody's got an issue with that. So look, the Puka Nacua one, I'm with you. That was a bad call. No way around it. I have more of a pass for that one as opposed to straight up blown calls, because look, if a player's going to be savvy and fool the ref and do something sneaky to where the ref can't see it, all right, look, you played the game. You played the game right there. My issue is when things are happening right in front of the ref's eyes and they act like they don't see it, or they throw a flag on something that clearly is not there. Those are my issues, the blatant ones. And I also have an issue when refs alter the outcome of the game. That was my issue with the Chiefs one. It's not that I'm upset with the refs that they made the call. Yes, I will admit it's a correct call. He's offsides. it's not like I'm telling the ref to pick the flag up. I just don't like those situations where the game is on the line, the players are making their plays, and a call ends up being the difference. Not that I'm
but in
not
that case, that man was lined up
job
as a defender. That man was a defender. Like, he's literally almost on the other side of the field.
He is.
It was that egregious, but they could not ignore that.
No, like, I'm not telling them to not throw the flag. I'm just saying we could see that. I saw rewatching the film. Isaiah Likely had a situation where he's lined up off sides, no flag.
Was it that bad?
Happens. Huh?
Was it that bad?
I mean, he was off sides. I even saw somebody else like screenshot it on Twitter. If I could find that tweet again, I'll end up sending it to you.
All I know is that Kadarius Toney was far off the line.
Yeah, he's off the ball, and he doesn't check with the ref. That's my issue. It starts with him.
That's my issue too, which is something that you learn very early on in football. Let me give you another game though that I can reference in terms of like where I had a problem with refs. I'll give you the Chiefs-Packers game a couple weeks ago, where they threw a flag against the Green Bay Packers for unnecessary roughness, where Patrick Mahomes is clearly he's not fully out of bounds. His 1 foot is still in bounds, and the Packers player gives him a shoulder bump to get out of bounds because he's trying to get the first down, right? It's obvious. And the player bumps him in the it's just he bumping him out of bounds, right? And it's football, so obviously it's more than like a little baby bump that I'm implying. It's a football bump, which is, yes, it's a little aggressive because football is an aggressive sport. But clearly his 1 foot is still in bounds. They call unnecessary roughness. Hated it. Then they turn around at the end of that game, and the Chiefs player is essentially being tackled down. The man's arm is around the player's neck, and they no call it. That's the problem that I have. Right. When they do things right, because we feel like it's affecting the outcomes of the game, we argue about it. When I really feel like that the issue is not even, if they were more consistent about getting it right, I don't think that we're having this conversation. That's my personal belief about the Toney offsides. It's games like that Packers-Chiefs game what makes us argue about when y'all actually getting it right, but then the outcome, because ultimately the outcome of that game would have probably changed if they called the pass interference against the Packers, right? I think you and I both can agree, because that was a spot foul. They would have been, I think, in the red zone at that point. Probably scored, right? But ultimately, the problem is that even when they get it right, we argue about it because it's so many times that they don't get it right that now the lines are blurred. The lines are essentially blurred every single time. And while they're not going to always get it right, I get it. They're human like everybody else. I think that sometimes we just try to find reasons to argue about refs, but that's a ref problem. It's because they've created this problem. Nobody came to see you, Otis. They came to see the players. They don't come to see you. Y'all have inserted yourselves into these games. And even if it's the right thing to do, we feel like that y'all are doing too much by putting yourselves in situations that you don't belong in. That's a ref problem. And that's a league problem.
And that's what I was saying. That goes into the overall hatred of refs in sports universally, because we're there to see the teams. We're there to see the players, not the refs. Even when they're making the correct call, we hate it. So, and you say, I think everybody wants consistency from these guys. The overall truth is it's tough to be consistent when you're having to eyeball things on the fly, and they're apparently not allowed to look at the jumbotron for replays. What really needs to happen is this ref that they have, the eye in the sky that they like to call it, the New York or whoever, it needs to be somebody that makes it so that these bad calls, they don't just let ride. They should be there overriding them. And sometimes they pick the flag up, but half the time they don't. And it's too many ways to get the play right with all the different camera angles that they have, that, okay, the refs that are there in person on the field, they can't obviously see everything. They don't have the constant different replay angles that we get at home. That's where New York should come in and make sure that they're batting as close to 1,000 as they possibly can. Right now, refs are allowed to pretty much use discretion. That you can't tell me the back end of that Packers and Chiefs game wasn't a ref basically saying, I'm not going to decide this game today. I'm not throwing my flag to
but
the
how
side.
do we feel about that? If it's blatant, how do we, you know what I'm saying?
I think it's terrible. I think that's a terrible way to look at it. I do. If you're going to, if it's a call, if it's a blatant call, you got to make it. I'm all for swallowing the flag when there's a holding call going on to this side of the field in the last minute of the game, and the play is going to the complete opposite side of the field, and that defender had no type of impact on the play whatsoever. I'm completely fine with that. If the foul does not impact the outcome of the play, let it ride. Let the players decide what's going to go on. But I just think too many times we've seen flags from the other side of the field. We've seen flags happen on stuff that's not even there, to the point to where, all right, you get in that final minute, you get a 60-yard pass down the field, a receiver's getting bear hugged. You want to see the flag thrown, because how could he possibly make a play on the ball? Not even that one. People also kind of the fans even excused it when Travis Kelce was tackled on the Hail Mary to end the game. Like, come on.
And look, in that situation too, right? Like, so I think that there's a consensus that Hail Marys don't, like, they allow them to beat each other.
That's the trap, I feel like.
That's something that's a consensus that we've seen over time.
Right.
That flag, that non-flag. And I think that we have problems with this because if it's your team, and if your team doesn't get that call and it's blatant, it is blatant, you are upset. And so I think people just want consistency, and you're not going to get that, Cordell, because every ref team is different.
Right.
Some people call holding more. Some people call pass interference more. It's not consistent across the board. I don't know how you can fix this. People will say, oh, they need to be full-time. Well, NBA got full-time refs. We see that ain't changed nothing over there. Why do you think that that's going to change anything over here is beyond me. But there has to be a conversation, at least a dialogue that the NFL has to start having. My concern is with betting being involved now, as big as it is, when it starts shifting to something into a realm that you don't want it to be. And I don't want to use the words, but I am concerned. I'm concerned moving forward about safety. Let me say it like that. I am concerned about the safety of these guys, because now people are so invested with betting that you got to know that at some point that's somewhere on the horizon. Football in America is kind of like soccer in the rest of the world, right? Where it's rabid. And now you have people actually spending money and betting on these games. My concern is that at some point, somebody's going to make a decision that is a horrible one, by the way, because at the end of the day, it's still sports, right? But one that is going to affect what goes on moving forward. I just don't, and I don't want to see that. I don't want to see that. And that's my concern. Y'all not getting it right. Y'all not making these calls. That's at some point, somebody's going to, it's going to affect somebody. I don't want to use the word.
Somebody's going to be rash.
I'm not inciting violence on anybody. Right. But it's something that the league.
People are crazy.
Think. That's all I'm saying. People are crazy, Cordell. And you got to wonder what's going to happen if these refs keep making the decisions or the non-decisions that they're making moving forward.
And I think the league has to, like I said, I think the league has to do a better job of correcting the bad calls. Like, too many times we've seen them let things ride when it's clear that that's not the way it should have went. And what's the point of having the ref crew in New York or the eye in the sky if they're not going to be there to make sure that the call is correct each time? So if we want consistency, again, I think it's tough to ask those humans that are playing refs that are there watching it live action to always get it right. But that's what the people on the back end are there for, to kind of be their backup and make sure that they do get the right call in the end.
Completely agree. I have a controversial take, but I'll hold that for another conversation. I am pro ageism when it comes to refs. And people aren't going to like that, but I don't really care. That's the conversation we can have during the off season.
Hey, even beyond the refs, and this ain't even got nothing to do with the refs, I do think that there needs to be some sort of age limit for guys that are on the sideline. Look at the dude that messed his leg up in the Saints game a couple of weeks ago. Couldn't move out the way. If you're not mobile enough to move on the sidelines, they shouldn't be there because they're a hazard for themselves and the players. It always grinds my gears when I see these. And nothing against the older seasoned people, but look, I'm looking out for their health. Like, they're getting run over. We're seeing coaches get run over half the time. Like, come on, you got to be able to move.
That's all I'm saying. And that's the conversation we can have during the off season where we need some things to talk about.
Right.
Because I am ready to get on the bandwagon of ageism here when it comes to referees. All right, when we come back, let's talk about the AFC picture here on Winning Drive. All right, so AFC picture is as follows. Currently, the Baltimore Ravens are the sole number 1 seed in the AFC. We don't need to talk about the rest of the picture. I don't care. No, I'm just kidding. The Miami Dolphins somehow found a way on Monday night to lose, even though they were up 27-13, I believe, with 5 minutes left against the 4-8 Tennessee Titans. Somehow, some way found a way to lose. I don't think that the Dolphins have beat a team over 500, even though the Titans are not a 500 team, but I'm just making the point that the Dolphins found a way. Y'all will sit here and say Tyreek Hill wasn't there. Guess what? Injuries happen. That's life. I don't want to hear it. And so you have the Ravens and then the Dolphins, I believe, is it Kansas City and Jacksonville or Jacksonville and Kansas City in terms of the 3 and 4 seed? Guess what? It doesn't matter. The Ravens are the number 1 seed currently in the AFC, and that's what it's going to be. I would like to have a conversation, though, Cordell, about the AFC North. We keep talking about the playoff picture, and the AFC North picture is still not – it's not there yet. The Ravens don't have a strong hold against in the AFC North. Cleveland is on their heels, and with the way that they've been playing with Joe Flacco being the quarterback the past couple of weeks, listen, the Ravens are 10-3, but the Browns are 8-5. You got the Steelers at 7-6, followed by the Bengals at 7-6, but the Bengals have no division win, so that's why they are at the bottom of the AFC North. Now, coming in to the season, if you don't remember, guys, I projected Baltimore, Cleveland, Cincinnati, and Pittsburgh, and I feel like I might be onto something here. I think that when the season is all over, said and done, that will be the format. But hey, man, this is something that we have to talk about because it's not a given. If the Ravens somehow go 2-2 and the Browns finish out winning all of their games, the Browns win the AFC North. And so while we can sit here and say, oh, you know, these other teams, this, that, and the third, I think that you have to worry about what the Browns have going on. Here's their last 4 opponents. At home against the Bears, in Houston against the Texans, at home against the Jets, and away against the Bengals. I mean, it's very, very, look, it's very possible. That's all I'm saying. The possibility is there when you look at the opponents in which they are playing.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a possibility. They're only 2 games back. They're playing well. They've got a really good defense out there. Joe Flacco, I think, is giving that team life just by getting anything out of the offense, is motivating the defense to continue, you know, to be at their best. I think I'm still of the mindset that I think that the Ravens are comfortably going to win the division still,
Really?
Even despite their tough schedule. Yeah, even despite the tough schedule, I just think that the Ravens are elite. I think it's more about how I feel about the Ravens as a team than necessarily a knock on the Browns. I not that I don't think that the Browns can go through that easy the rest of their schedule, but I don't look at them and pencil them in as like a favorite for each of those games. Even if they are, they could still lose them. You know, they're not that dominant. But yeah, I mean, obviously the Ravens having to take on teams like Miami and Jacksonville that are still in the top 4 in the conference. And obviously we know about that matchup against the Niners coming up as well on Christmas night. So they do have a tougher road than Pittsburgh at the end of the season. Pittsburgh, I'm sure, will still be having something to fight for potentially. We'll see. But I don't know. I like the idea though of a potential Flacco Ravens playoff matchup.
I do not.
That's
I do not, because that Browns defense is very good. I don't like it. Forget Flacco. Forget Flacco. I don't want to play that defense anymore. I don't want to see them play that defense again. I'm not interested.
I mean, if three AFC North teams get in, odds are you're going to see one of them. You're either going to see Pittsburgh or Cleveland at some point.
Pittsburgh ain't making it. Come on, let's be real here. Now, I mean, you really think that the Steelers are going to end up being better than the Bengals, the way that the Bengals have played lately?
I think the Bengals have played better. But Pittsburgh has won. They win ugly in all their wins. They most of their wins
lose
are
ugly
games
too.
They do, no question. Most of their wins are games that they really have no business winning, and they somehow pull it out. I don't know. I mean, I put stock into the Texans, but CJ Stroud, Nico Collins, Tank Dell going down. I don't know if they have enough to get through the end, and they're a young team as is that's already overachieving. The Broncos, they're on a little bit of a hot streak. Definitely got to watch.
The Broncos can win. I think that the Broncos can get in, friend.
They definitely can get in. I mean, if it's not going to be Pittsburgh, I would actually say that I would think that I'm going to put more stock into the Broncos over Cincinnati.
The Broncos could potentially win their own division. They're only one game back.
Yeah, I don't see that happening though.
So there's that part of it too, right? The Broncos are in a situation where they could. This is who the Broncos play. Now, this is who the Broncos play. The last 4 games of the season. They have the Lions, which is the hardest opponent that they have. Then they have the Patriots, the Chargers, and the Raiders. I can see the Broncos going 3-1 at minimum, moving down the stretch. That part is very true. I can see it happening. Here's the thing about the Steelers, and this is who they play the last 4 games of their season. They play the Colts, which I know just lost badly to the Bengals, but the Colts currently, I believe, are in the playoffs. I believe.
Outside.
Well, okay, so the Bengals put them outside. They were in prior to Sunday's game. The Bengals must have pushed them out. All right, there's that. They then play the Bengals, who have been playing well. They then play the Seahawks, which
I'm sorry. You're right. I forgot. I'm still on the old format. I forgot it's 7 teams in the postseason now.
So I know prior to Sunday's game, the Colts were in. So I have to go back and look. I'm looking at the schedule now.
They still are.
They're still in. Okay. So you got the Bengals then after that. This is the Steelers schedule. You got the Seahawks after that, and then you end with the Ravens. That is, what do you think that the Steelers end with at that point?
I mean, the reality is, I think looking at all of their schedule, a lot of the league is very mediocre right now. So all of these teams really have favorable schedules. I mean,
except for the Ravens.
Except for the Ravens, right. Except for the Ravens. But even Kansas City's schedule is very light. I mean, I just glanced at it. They got the Chargers, the Raiders, the Patriots, and one other mediocre team in the AFC. So, I mean, all of them will have a somewhat easy road, but they're all stuck in the middle right now. These are all teams that are like jumbled up in the middle, probably outside of the Chiefs. Everybody else is kind of just in that middle range. And as good as the Broncos have played as of late, winners of 6 of their last 7 games, they could fall off a cliff tomorrow for all we know. It's just I don't put much stock into any of the 5 to below teams. And I might even throw Jacksonville in there, considering they're without Christian Kirk. Trevor Lawrence stunk on Sunday trying to play through his injury. I don't know how sustainable that's going to be. But I do think that it'll be an interesting race for the back end of the postseason. But for the top 4, I do still believe, I think the Ravens, especially coming off that win against the Rams, I think the defense will come out with a looking to kind of make up for that performance against the Jags. I just envision the Ravens really rising to the challenge against some of these opponents that they have on the back end of the season, especially understanding how big that Dolphins game will be for them, how big that Jacksonville game will be for them. And I think it could serve a benefit for the Ravens going into that Niners game, understanding that they're pretty much going, if they beat Jacksonville, they'll be playing with house money going into that Niners game because a loss essentially wouldn't hurt them because they have the Dolphins.
Loss.
Exactly. Yep. A non-conference loss. They have the Dolphins the week after. I think they'll be able to play kind of loose and free against that Niners team. And who knows what'll happen. That'll be the matchup of the year for sure. But yeah, the AFC is so wide open in terms of the bottom half of the playoff picture. I don't give any of those teams a shot to really do anything in January anyway, but they do make for some interesting matchups in the postseason when you look at the Ravens potentially having to play Cleveland or even Pittsburgh or even a rematch against Indianapolis or Houston if they end up sneaking in. I just think any of those matchups are going to be somewhat intriguing.
I completely agree with you. So, the last 4 games of the season, we will find out how this shakes out. But as of right now, the Ravens are sole possession of first place, which obviously means they would get a first round bye if they continue to hold on to that honor. So we will see how the Ravens fare the last couple of weeks of the season. Hopefully they find a way to push through and make a strong case for having the number 1 seed. All right, on the next episode, we will preview the game against the Jacksonville Jaguars as they go down Jacksonville for the Sunday night game, and we'll give our predictions. They have some injuries on their end. I believe Christian Kirk is not been healthy and isn't played. We know the situation with Trevor Lawrence. You already mentioned he's playing with a high ankle sprain, and that's because they know that the Texans are kind of on their heels, so I guess they're pressing a little bit, but is it hurting them more than helping them? And we'll talk about that on the next episode of Winning Drive. We appreciate you all for listening. So from Cordell to me, this is Winning Drive.